In our next session here, I would like to introduce Jaime Rodera from Nestle. Jaime is the Data Privacy and Consumer Data Manager at Nestle. And we're going to talk a little bit about that specifically, identifying challenges within the enterprise and just working to design, test, learn in order to be able to solve those. So, Jaime?
Hello. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So specifically, kind of as we shift gears a little bit, we're going to be focusing, kind of using, I guess, in order to guide the conversation, a specific case study for one of the challenges that you all were facing, and specifically the use of consent mode in order to address the challenge of less data. So as we've seen generally, I'm sure everyone's seen, once you introduce consents, there's less data to work with. We have a lot of gaps in that data collection, with consent mode being one solution that's really been put forth in order to be able to solve or help solve that challenge. Can you tell us just a little bit about the challenge that you were specifically facing, and then how you came to consent mode as a potential solution there?
Sure. Thanks very much for inviting me here. Just for everyone to know, I lead data privacy and consumer data in Nestle at a global level. So when we received the first email from one of the markets saying like, Jaime, we are losing traffic. So we were talking to our IT team in Barcelona, which Eva is here as well today. And we said, like, well, what do you mean with losing traffic? And then after that email, we received another email from another market saying, we are losing traffic. And then we said, like, well, we have to tackle this issue. So after investigating a bit further with our IT team in Barcelona and InfoTrust as well, we noticed that it was not losing traffic. We were losing observable traffic. Like, your traffic is still there, but you cannot see it. So that was the logic that we found and the things that we had to put on the table to all the markets. So as you can imagine, being a global corporation, finding that and explaining that in very plain language to all the markets is not an easy task. But with, again, partners like yourself and experts in Barcelona, we were able to identify the problem and then explore other solutions such as consent mode.
Wonderful. And so just to, I guess, level set a little bit here, provide a little bit of context, we're talking about consent mode, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, but maybe not all of you. So just to give a very high-level kind of overview. So as Jaime mentioned, consent mode is meant to address this challenge of observable traffic. So we see here on the left side of the graphic our historic situation. No consents, no browser restrictions. We have deterministic data, more or less. We can observe the behaviors of pretty much all interactions across our digital properties. Now, around 2018, for people that were doing things properly for GDPR, but really around 2020 was when, with the introduction of explicit consent, organizations started seeing this phenomenon, as Jaime mentioned, of significant reductions in that observable traffic. So what consent mode is meant to address is to fill that gap with modeled data, really relying on that observable traffic from consented users and then anonymous interactions from those non-consenting users. And so, again, a little more context for that solution. It is applicable for Google platforms, and it allows for the anonymous data collection without the accessing or setting of cookies for users regardless of that consent status. And then for users that do consent, you're still collecting everything, right? So with Jaime and with Nestle, kind of identifying this potential solution here, and to get back to how you actually tested it and how we actually executed this, can you really take us through just the process for how you determined the ideal approach for bringing this potential solution to a test?
So I think we all are aware that cookie consent banners nowadays, we all have to have a clear accept, a clear decline, and cookie preference for people to select what they want to opt in and opt out. I think that's the standard from the industry, and I think that's the right thing to do. So with that in mind, what we noticed is like, well, we have to find a solution first, a tech solution. Consent mode is one of that. Let's test it. So we actually, together with the partner and the IT experts, we were having calls with specific markets to tell them, like, this is the solution that we have globally, and we want to test it first before we scale it. So we created testing frameworks together with you guys and the IT department, and basically pitching these test frameworks to all the markets. So once we found that alignment with the markets, we brought that to our legal departments. When I joined Nestle, I didn't really like lawyers, but nowadays are my best friends because I really think they're crucial in advertising. And nowadays, they're very important, all the POVs that we put together. We have a very knowledgeable person in the legal team that knows a lot about digital, and I think that person is very important in these exercises. So yeah, putting a POV together with the knowledge from the IT, legal, and marketing, and then cascading that to the markets so they understand what we want to accomplish and building those testing frameworks for them.
Okay. So really, I guess, clearly defining the test, clearly defining the challenge, as you mentioned before, clearly defining exactly how you're meaning to test with a particular solution, and then taking that almost like a full solution, or at least full solution proposal, to legal for review on the compliance side. And
exactly. Yeah,
to make sure.
It's putting all together in one document and bringing this to legal. This is what we want to do.
Okay.
Are you okay with this? Yes or no? And there were like obviously many back and forth, but I think we got a good agreement.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a key takeaway here is making it as easy as possible for the counterparts across different parts of the organization. So often, IT, legal, the business, speaking different languages. Translate as much as possible in order to be able to kind of get approval and move things across.
I fully agree. I think this couldn't have happened without me being a translator with a Spanish accent. So yeah, it's crucial that all of us speak the same language. Yep. But unless you have that type of profile in a company, it's very difficult for everyone to speak the same language, yep, regardless of your nationality.
So I guess getting back a little bit to the specific testing framework here for the consent mode test, so we can continue to use this as the example and shine some light there. So with the test that we ran with Nestle, essentially the purpose here was to be able to understand what is the impact of consent modes on the observable data within reporting. And then does that solve the concerns that were being brought by markets around that loss in observability and the inability for them to be able to get the insights necessary? So how we tested this, we worked with the Nestle IT team in order to be able to design a control and then a test group. We set up GA4 properties, one with only explicit consent, so only collecting data for users after they had consented. The other property was loading for all users, but was using consent mode. So we let those run for, what was it, about 2 months?
Month and a half.
And then we compared for the exact same period of time, month over month data, some information around just core key metrics. Users, engaged sessions, total observed events, in order to be able to just recognize, is there uplift? Does the market, does the actual users of the information, are they getting what they need? So that was the test framework used here. If anyone is planning on testing kind of moving forward, you no longer need that two-property approach. You can simply just compare metrics using the reporting identities within a GA4 property. But that type of a test in order to be able to really learn from those actions and then determine if it's necessary or feasible to scale. So that was the framework, just to provide some context there. Now, obviously, once we put this in place, took it live, provided the results to you, can you talk us a little bit through what those observed outcomes were, and then how you plan on potentially scaling based upon those learnings?
So yeah, once we set up those calls with those specific markets together with the partner and the IT department, we walked them through the tests, we launched the tests, and then we showed them the results, like specifically for the market and then at the global level. So we have seen a 20% increasing observable traffic overall. So that was the number that it was actually quite important for us, because we were saying, like, regardless of the cookie consent bans, because we have to exceed consumers' expectations, to Adam's point, let's actually like focus on the technology and the solution, what it does for us. So we have seen that that number, it was extremely important for us to cascade and actually scale that to all the EU markets. And now what we are trying to do, or at least what I'm trying to do, is like, regardless of the legislation, which can be very complex in every EU country, let's almost set up a higher standard at a Nestle level. So we have the Nestle privacy standards, and within that, we want to almost create a rule that goes above all of that. So Google Consent Mode is now part of the standard architecture for our CMP deployment. So we have a consent management platform. Every time a new market or new brand wants to deploy a CMP, obviously Google Consent Mode is by default the standard. If for whatever reason that market has any legality or any issues with the legality, then obviously they can come back to us and tell us, like, Jaime, we are not ready for this due to these issues. But then our legal department can also support that case. So that's almost like the way that we want to scale it globally, now that we have the results and we have seen that the technology works for us in that case.
Okay. You've mentioned kind of the global standards and like the POVs being put together at that global level in order to be leveraged by various different markets and different brands. I guess, can you speak a little bit to just the thought process behind like how you've determined that, yes, this is the ideal approach, you know, to take?
So there is one word in Nestle that is very, I didn't even know that's in English, alignment. So in order for us to be aligned, I had to knock at everyone's door saying, like, hey, I'm planning to do this. Again, to my point before, the lawyer here was very important to have her on this project because she had to understand that. So I guess the POV was almost the proof of concept for us to say, like, yes, you can scale it. You have the green light from different functions. But until we got there, there was a lot of back and forth. Mm-hmm. And I had to put a lot of energy and effort on this pilot. So I guess that was the main approach, that alignment that I didn't even know what was the meaning before I joined Nestle. Yeah.
Now it's crystal
clear.
Very,
very clear.
So this process that was used here and this kind of like test, learn, scale type of a framework to solve a specific challenge in this case, how are you thinking about operationalizing the process in order to be able to solve additional challenges as you identify them within the business?
So because we notice and we see that this process of putting POVs together and cascading that to markets worked, in this case with Google Consent Mode, we have built a cookieless roadmap. So every month, I sit down with key markets at Nestle, and we discuss privacy-enhancing technologies that they want to test in different markets. We put them all in a basket, and then we decide, based on the priority of the business, what should we pick. Lawyers and IT people are also in these rooms. So I think, again, my concept here is like, let's bring people together, and let's have a roadmap, cookieless roadmap, with all the technologies that partners such as Google and others are releasing and launching. So I think, again, to my previous point, the word alignment is very important because it's not just on the cookieless, it's also on the functions. So it's pure alignment all the time.
I guess the process for bringing forth these potential cookieless solutions, is it the markets that are involved in this process that are bringing those to the table? Are you kind of providing those different ideas for discussion? Yeah. How does that surfacing of potential solutions or even surfacing of the challenges to identify what is most important for us to be able to put our time and effort?
That's a good question. At a global level, I don't have full visibility on what has happened in every market. We operate in 186 markets, so it's maybe too much for me to digest. But what I do is create the framework for them to participate and contribute. So markets bring their solutions to the table, and then together we prioritize based on the level of synergies and commonalities that they have between each other. Okay. So are not the same technologies, for instance, in Malaysia than in Spain or in Italy, but ultimately we want to come up with a strong or robust solution for all of them. Okay. So yeah, it's finding the commonalities and the synergies between the solutions that they are looking for.
So more or less identifying what is going to have the biggest impact based upon a lot of those different
100%.
discussions. Okay. Now, you've mentioned the various different teams and different languages and everything a few different times.
Yes.
For you, sitting at that like interesting intersection between business, legal, and technology as well, any insights that you could share for how you've been able to effectively work across those different functional areas?
I guess the main insight for me is my best friends are lawyers. And I cannot believe that I'm saying that in public, actually. But so my roles have been created, I think, due to the pressure from the regulators. I've been working in digital advertising for the last 10 years. I don't think we had that much pressure before from regulators, but that's creating more transparency in the whole industry. So I think being that middleman that connects legal, IT, marketing, on all the departments is extremely challenging because you have to be able to translate, which is, to your point, talk the same language across the organization, especially if you were in an organization such as Nestle, that is very complex, different brands, different markets, categories, zones. So I guess I'm very privileged to have that role because I have a very good view of what is happening in each function, but I struggle, now less than at the beginning, to put that all together in one room, like just people, functions, projects, and all of that. So I think it's a very important role in organizations, and I hope that more and more we see roles like mine in big corporations or small brands.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see a very large uptick in that type of.
Who knows? Maybe I'm a lawyer in 5 years.
So I guess that relationship there, and kind of for everyone between marketing, advertising, and the legal teams, it used to always be there's that tension between marketing and sales, right? That was always where tension was and challenges were that had to be resolved in order to be able to move the business forward. Now we're seeing that much more with marketing and the business and legal. It's kind of an interesting development. Any thoughts on, we talked some about those, like the cookieless initiatives. Any thoughts on any of those cookieless initiatives coming to market? Ideas for what enterprises really should be thinking about in that space?
Yeah, we are collaborating quite strongly with Google on the privacy sandbox. So actually at the end of the month, we have invited Google to present what is the privacy sandbox. We know, marketing people know what it is, but we want legal people and IT people to understand how we can be connected. So again, I think everyone understands the concept of the privacy sandbox, but it's bring it to us in a very simple way, explain to a lawyer what is a privacy sandbox. So that's part of my role as well, but we want to bring partners together. So I guess we try to do that with not just Google, with all the partners. We're just trying to push that and make them understand that this is the way that we work together at Nestle at a global level. I guess that would be my main takeaway from the partnership with collaborating with partners and giving them kind of a view on how we work together internally, which I don't think they had that before.
Okay. Because one kind of follow-up there, you talk about having partners bring that education directly to various different teams, which I think is often missing, at least traditionally. Are you setting that up with a formal structure, or is it just as solutions come? How are you approaching that educational aspect?
Yeah, so as part of my scope, I run these quarterly privacy forums where I bring external speakers and internal stakeholders to present these hot topics on privacy. So that's how I formalize it internally. Every quarter they know that someone is going to come here and explain to us what's happening on their end, on our end. Yep. So I think that's the way that I do it. For instance, a very important point for me is data ethics. I'm quite connected to this because at the end of the day, I think we want the same thing, to do good with data. And I participate in monthly sessions with the WFA, with the World Federation of Advertisers. And data ethics is probably the hottest topic at the moment in the organization. So again, I'm bringing them to these quarterly sessions. They talk to us, they educate us, and then they go back, and then we digest that information internally.
Nice.
So that's how I do it.
Those are really all the questions that I have. Any final thoughts or just like key points that you think people should really keep in mind as we think about this intersection of different business units and also, testing, learning, scaling some of these new solutions?
I mean, for me, the key points are trying to find the way to be transparent with your consumer. I think it's time to stop and we shouldn't really use dark patterns to really manipulate consumers' choice. We have to provide transparency, fairness. I think we all understand the concept, but the application of that on digital advertising is a bit complex. So educating us on that field is incredibly important, and partnering and testing technologies, I think, is the right thing to do. I know that we are all scared a bit of testing and not really sure if I'm collecting or not. Like, I think it's a moment to actually trust and build trust internally first, and then test with partners all of these privacy-enhancing technologies. And then make sure that your lawyers are your friends. That would be my main takeaway.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very, very much. A lot of, insightful information there.